Hey everybody, it's Carm here. Back in another lovely spring day. Uh, Wanted to come on and just share a few current listens, a few of quite a bit. But yeah, I don't think I've done one of these, and it's probably been at least a year. This particular series, which try to revive this and maybe a few others, maybe start something new as well. See what comes along. But yeah, just a few things have been spinning. Starting right in, Group 87, a career in data processing. They did I think they only did two albums, I believe. The first one was self-titled, and the group consists of Mark Isham on trumpets, electronics, keyboards. Uh, a longtime favorite and my all-time favorite albums of his is Vapor Drawings, which was done around the time of this. This was done, recorded between late 83 and early 84. And also joined on here by Peter Maunu on guitars, guitar synthesizer, violin, mandolin, and percussion. Um, yeah, they played together at the time and quite a history together. And Patrick O'Hearn isn't credited, well, it says he credited compositionally with some contributions, but it doesn't say exactly what he plays. He was on the first album on bass and electronics. And of course, he, as well as Mark, went on to great solo careers, as well as many soundtracks. Mark himself has done many soundtracks. And so Peter and Mark are joined by Peter Van Hook on electronic and acoustic drums and percussion, and produced by Mark Isham, Peter Maunu. And yeah, again, their second album. Their first album is more of, I'd say, more of a progressive instrumental rock, although it goes into a lot of other territory, textures, um, different styles. On here, it's more overtly electronic. I guess you could say electro pop, synth pop, but still with a similarly evocative, and appropriately enough, quite cinematic. As of course, again, Mark himself did. It's come to a lot of subsequent soundtracks. And again, mentioning Vapor Drawings before, if you know that album, it almost sounds like an extension of it at times. Again, a little more upbeat, a little more pop oriented. Pop with enough, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term, offbeatness, quirkiness. It's very accessible, very easy to get into, but has enough to lead you down sort of unknown pathways or just unorthodox places. It's always enjoyable, especially with them. Um, with Mark's own playing, if you know his sound, he has a very distinctive compositional sound, very much tied in with his instrumental sound, which may sound obvious, but there is something about the way someone blends their instruments and their compositions, the way it's kind of fused into one thing, one phenomenon. The way he blends his trumpets, sounding almost like a choral approach, as well as the synthesizers as a backdrop, and with Peter's own guitars, texturally and harmonically, providing the lead melody as well as kind of a bed for everything to rest on. Also, his violin playing adds kind of a different element, a little bit of Eastern influence, and something maybe even a little more. A lot of this album, because of the electronics, it sounds almost futuristic for its time. The violin gives it kind of a groundedness and even a little bit of a harp to the past, kind of the past and future, converging. And they do it in such a way that's very, very seamless and organic. Even though this does sound, it sounds of its time, but not locked in its time, so to speak. It's a 40-year-old album, but it could have been done now. And there's a lot of things that are being done now that sound, have a feel like this. Although I haven't heard anything that has that is quite as distinctive because of the artists involved. What they're doing is so much, their signature sounds were very much laid down here in this early project. So if you're interested in getting into the music of any of these artists, particularly Mark himself, Mark Isham, besides again Vapor Drawings and some of his early soundtracks like Film Music, which compiles some of his early soundtracks from the 80s. This is a good place to start to get into him and these artists in general. Yeah, great stuff, great fun revisiting this. Yeah, Group 87, Career in Data Processing, 1984. Something revisiting after not hearing it for quite a while. Ahmad Jamal, 73, from 1973. It's on the 20th Century Records. An artist that I hadn't really explored a great deal before. Here and there, I have another album of his called Crystal. I believe he started out, and sadly had found out just recently that he had passed on about a year ago. After a very long, quite varied career, played with so many different people in different contexts. He had started out as a fairly traditional jazz piano player. It's kind of into what could be called bebop and then cool jazz, but really found his own voice. Just from what I've heard, his own playing overall has a great sense of space and patience. Not so much concerned with. He has great technical capability. When you think of like the fast runs, the bebop runs of that kind of piano. But for him, I think he had a sense of sitting, kind of standing back, slowing down, and taking in the music, and then adding his own approach, which had more to do with the spaces between the notes, and really soaking up the moment of inspiration. Not in a hurry, but really, even on faster paced numbers, just taking his time and really taking it all in. And on here, he's playing all Fender Rhodes electric piano, which I've always enjoyed, and it's always nice to hear someone just focus on that instrument in a more traditional context. Although this is more, you could say, electric jazz, bringing in soul, R&B, and even a little bit of classical, orchestral, as far as the approach and the arrangements. It doesn't give credit to the bassist or the drummer, because it sounds like it's basically a trio augmented by orchestra. But the orchestra is conducted and arranged by Richard Evans, who's also the co-producer along with Ahmad. Throughout, this is another album that has a cinematic feel to it. Mostly urban landscapes. Like this is actually recorded in Chicago. You can imagine sitting or standing under a fire escape and kind of watching it up against the sky, framed by the buildings and all the traffic and street noises. But the orchestra kind of lends itself almost a bucolic feel. So it's almost like a little juxtaposition of the urban and the rural, more on the urban side. And then Ahmad's playing both propels the music as well as gives it like a sense of grounding or anchoring. And again, his playing has that kind of, it has a sparseness, but not simplistic. He's really hearing the notes ring out, which you really like. I really like that on electric piano, since that instrument has a certain texture, almost acoustic at times. You think you're hearing something like a vibraphone or some kind of a bell-like instrument, which electric piano has that property to it. But also, again, that electronic or that electricness of it too. You have that blend within the instrument itself, and you could tell he's really hearing that and really feeling that through. So that gives it another character altogether. And again, blended with the orchestra, it's just lovely, texturally as well as musically, and the way you're listening to the whole field, it's really a beautiful blend. Does mostly, or I think primarily, all covers here, including Stevie Wonder's Superstition, which he plays fairly straight, at least with the orchestral arrangement, but his own playing kind of, even as he's playing the melody straight, he's kind of almost like he's looking at it from a side, like kind of glancing around it and trying different things within it. So he's playing it straight, but in a way not, which is refreshing to hear. And there's, I think half of the songs, at least half the songs, have vocals and lyrics. Although instead of a lead singer playing with the group behind them, it's almost like a small choral group. It sounds like female vocalists, almost like maybe like a small gospel choir, but approaching it more as much in the background as the foreground. So the voices are blended in with the instruments as instruments themselves, rather than lead and background. The lines kind of erased between those, which I find that refreshing too with this whole approach. But really a beautiful record, and there's also chances for the trio to kind of stretch out too and improvise more. But again, never overplaying, never sounding, out of place, or, even when they sort of take it a little bit further out, it still stays very, very grounded and solid within the tunes. And just a really nice balance overall. And again, not really having heard a whole lot of his music beforehand, I don't know what else to really compare it to. But if you all have recommendations for his music, otherwise, I definitely would like to hear get into more of it. But yeah, as far as an introduction or just another aspect of the music of this time, these being made 50 years ago, blending those various styles. This is a really nice one to come across. So yeah, Ahmad Jamal, 73, from 73. This last one is new to me, and it's Wayne Phoenix, Soaring, Story, the Earth and Sky. This was on the RVNG label, which had re-released, reissued, as well as newer albums by Paulina Anna Strom. And I've checked out some of the other parts of the catalog, and it's fascinating, both older and newer artists, blending, really it's a lot of electroacoustic music, electronic and acoustic, as well as soundscapes, sounds of nature, everyday sounds, and there's a lot of this on this album. I believe he's a UK-based artist, and this album, at least conceptually, had been in the works for maybe a decade or so. Not quite sure what his intentions were here, but it's so impressionistic to me. I guess I don't know. I can't help but sort of attach my own impressions to it. It sounds like it's mostly synthesizers, some electronic percussion, as well as his own voice, and some other contributors. Some of these songs are co-written by others. But it sounds to me like, I don't know, lately I've had this kind of, I've had in some ways a lifelong obsession with what could be called a liminal, when you think of spaces in between points of intention, like you're going from one place to another, you think of that space in between, whether it's a physical space like, sidewalks, elevators, escalators, roadways themselves, hallways. But you could also think in terms of your own dreams, nocturnal dreams, daydreams, the hypnagogic state, or that gray area in between consciousness, the sleeping and waking state, where something within the dream you're having kind of merges or blends with something that's happening in the room in which you're resting in, music that's playing, or the TV, or somebody who's trying to get your attention because you've fallen asleep and their voice is coming in. A lot of this album really sounds to me like that. It's a lot of short pieces. I think it's 15 pieces, and it sounds like these vignettes of that very thing is the impression that I get from it. Snippets of conversation, little monologues, traveling from one room to another. Someone gets your attention, then you're fixated on something else, and then it takes another turn, and then you're outside watching a river go by. You're hearing birds, and then you're in another place. So it's almost like maybe like the old car radios where you would hit a button and you flip from station to station. Only this is done more in slow motion. So it's not so much that you're constantly being pulled in other directions, but it's happening a little more gradually. But it does have that sense of fractured attention. And again, that kind of moving from one liminal space to another. Or speaking of, I've mentioned in the past, like going from one little thing to another, where your attention is grabbed in one direction, and then you're noticing like a stack of photos in one spot, and then the light comes through the window a certain way, and then someone walks into a room. All these little, you almost think of it like cut-ups, like the old William Burroughs cut-ups. But there is a certain flow and logic to what he's doing, but it's so abstract and kind of indirect. It's a little hard to describe and verbalize. At least I find it. But that's the impression I'm getting a lot from his music. There is a passage on here where there was a longer vocal cut, where kind of alluding to the previous album. It's kind of like a choir coming in, almost like a gospel choir, but that's almost like this incantation, something very direct and definite, and then it goes back into the dreamscape where it's a little fractured again. And the last piece kind of reminds me of like a dance club out in the forest somewhere. You have, kind of this dance club with these very solid dance beats along with birdsong. So again, it's kind of like those two environments are being merged. But again, in kind of an abstract, notional way. It's not quite as direct, but it's still very visceral and very powerful. And this is very much worth hearing. It's a very good headphone listen if you really want to get inside of it. And maybe when you hear it, if you give this a try, you could hear something more definite than I did. These are just little impressions, but it's powerful stuff, and it's something that's definitely fresh and original. Draws on the past in certain ways, but it's traveling on to something new. Yeah, this came out I think just last year, in 2023, and Wayne Phoenix, Soaring, Story, the Earth and Sky. Very much recommended. So, just want to share a few things I've been listening, among many other things, revisiting old favorites, and we'll see what comes next from here. So, hope it's lovely wherever you're at. Just soaking it up out here, and I thought I'd come on and share a few of these. So, hope all's well until the next one. Peace, love, and joy.